Folks, if you have not yet had a chance to meet, I am grateful to be able to introduce to you today a friend of mine, Betsy Meyer. Betsy is one of the leaders and organizers of the Thembalethu care organization in South Africa, in the area of Winterton that we go and work. Many folks have been here that have worked on the playground there, that have moved the water fountain there, the water jug there on a new platform. We've done helped with some age education programming, and we've also been able to put on kind of like a VBS kind of feel and some holiday club fun for the kids that are there. It's a place that once you go, you fall in love with, and it is in you and stays with you forever. And I am grateful that you all get a chance to see who it is we partner with and work with. And Betsy, I'm grateful for you to get to meet our congregation, folks that have loved you and heard about you and have prayed for you and the work that's been done. And I'm glad we get a chance to share in that together. Will you come and tell us? Betsy's going to be able to talk to us for a couple minutes with some information towards the kids. And in about 10 minutes or so, the kids are going to be given an opportunity to go with Jeff and participate in the choir. And we'll keep going with the program. Thanks, Betsy.
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me here. I've been in the Tennessee area for a few days now. Started out in Memphis. This is my first time in the state and in this region, so it's really exciting to get to see another part of the country. As Thomas very graciously said, I've been a missionary in South Africa for the last 15 years. Am I speaking too fast? I know I have. Am I okay? I have a habit of speaking very fast, so I apologize. But I've been in South Africa for the last 15 years. I'm originally from Seattle, and after being in South Africa for this time, my husband, who's a South African, decided he needed a change and really was struggling where we were, and so we've relocated to Seattle. So now I'm a non-residential missionary supporting South Africa, but from here, and I'll be going back and forth and continuing to support this organization that I started. But before I get into too much of that, because I know the kids are still here, let me just do a little bit focus on the kids. So this is my family, my husband, Eugene, and Kanya and Joshua. Joshua is 9, and Kanya is 6. Those are my 2 kids. And to give the kids, I just thought I'd give you all a little bit of a picture of what life is like a little bit in South Africa, to start off with. What we do there is in places like this, very rural villages in the Drakensberg Mountains. What we do is try to share God's love and hope in the midst of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. So there's lots of people that are sick with HIV and tuberculosis, lots of children who have lost their parents, and we try to share God's love in the midst of that. To give you a little bit of a picture, this is now going into someone's home. Our caregiver actually delivering a wheelchair out to a patient that needed one and didn't have one, and this is then inside a patient's home. So you see a lot of people live in pretty basic situations, and they often don't have a lot of money. And let me ask the kids, can you tell me, kids that are out there, can you tell me what's going on in the picture over here to the left? Do you see what's going on there? Can you see it? What do you think that woman's doing? Yeah? Yeah, getting water from a well, exactly. So there's wells like that, and you have to roll them like this, and that's how the water comes out. So you see she has a little toddler that's with her. They always go along because there's no one often for them to stay with. That's mom at home. And then she fills up a bucket. And then how do you think she carries it? On her shoulder, yeah? With her hands, yeah? Like carrying it like this? So I don't know if did I have a picture back here? There you go. See how the wheelchair's being carried there on top of her head? That's what they do. They take that big bucket of water and they lift it up, put it right on top of their heads. I still have not mastered the strength to be able to do that with a 20-gallon bucket of water, which is particularly heavy. Do you see what that is on the right? Any guesses what that building is on the right there? You guys can just shout it out. A church. Yeah, very good. This is a very rural a church that's just up the hill from our center, and as you see, there's not a lot of resources. This church is pretty small, and that's generally how the church is in South Africa. There aren't a lot of really solid churches. There aren't a lot of people that really follow Jesus. They tend to do traditional things with ancestors and ancestor worship, and they don't tend to do Jesus alone. They kind of do Jesus plus everything else. But this is just a little bit of a picture of kind of what, if you were meeting together in a church in South Africa, you would be in a place more like this. This is then just a little bit of the cultural side of things. These are the pictures of some of the men and some of the women. This is a coming out ceremony. So they've lost a lot of their traditions, and they don't practice them, but there are certain occasions. This is the Pumawentombi, which is the coming out of the girls, kind of like the debutante kind of thing, where the girls are available for marriage. So these girls that you see all dressed up there in those clothes are the ones that are ready to be married off. So just a bit of picture of like what the cultural life is. This is a preschool. So and some of you guys, I don't know if there's many preschoolers, but if you were in preschool, there's some in the back, maybe, yeah. So this is what preschools look like in South Africa. So the one on the left is one of our most beautiful preschools where the teacher has done a lot with very little resources. And then the one on the right is also a nice and tidy one that they've built all themselves out of the wood leftovers. And another one, and just a little bit of a picture of what your preschool would look like if you were in South Africa. And for you bigger kids, because there's quite a few of them, here's some pictures of what school would be like. This is a classroom that we have here of our facilitator. We do a program which is Bible-based life skills, and basically we try to get into the schools in grades 6 and 7 and have had an amazing response where the schools have let us in doing a very clearly Bible-based Christian curriculum, teaching kids about how to live their lives, how to see themselves, how to treat each other, how to be in relationships with each other, with friends of the opposite sex, and how to deal with all the pressures of puberty and things like that, and make good choices to protect them from HIV and also to protect them from pregnancy, which is a really big problem. So this is one of our facilitators up there giving in a classroom of kids, and then another classroom of kids with their little Reach for Life Bibles that they have as well. So the last thing before I'll share with you guys before the kids will be free to go is that, excuse me, I want you guys, can you kids tell me what number do you dial if it's an emergency in America? If someone's really sick or someone gets hurt, what number do you dial? 911, right? Very good. And what happens if you dial 911? An ambulance comes. You'll talk to the police, you'll have an ambulance come, someone will come and help you, right? So in South Africa, things are not always so good, and things are not always so easy. And often when people are really sick, they don't have someone that can help them. And especially when they get home from the hospital, there often is no support that they have. And this little boy you see in this picture, his name is Anele. He was 10 years old. When the picture was taken, and that is our nurse there reading him a Bible story. And he was very, very sick. He had kidney disease, kidney failure, and was very, very sick. And his granny was looking out for him. And his granny had never done much beyond 3rd grade and really didn't know how to care for him properly at home and felt really overwhelmed. The boxes that you see behind him filled up their whole house. So the whole wall behind me where I took this picture was full of boxes, the same, and they're home dialysis boxes. So they would he'd be in the hospital for long periods of time and get dialysis, and then they'd send him home, and those would be the boxes that his granny, who didn't know any health things at all, would give him to do home dialysis. And eventually he got really tired of the hospital thing, and he ended up passing away when he stopped the dialysis. But what we were able to do is come alongside him and his granny throughout the process of his being really sick and really walk with them a journey and share God's love with them. And even after his passing, support his granny. Because it was a really difficult journey for her to travel all alone without knowing who to go to and how to get help and how to really walk this journey of having a really sick grandchild. So that's what we do to share God's love. In the Bible, in Matthew 25, it talks about how Jesus said we should go and visit those who are sick. We should give food to the hungry, and care for those who are vulnerable around us. And I would just encourage you kids, you might not be in South Africa like I've been, but I would encourage you that there are people out there that are really lonely and need God's love, and that you guys can go and share his love just the same way we do in South Africa. So that's all I have for you kids. All right, so I'll continue on with the adult portion of this. Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. So this is a picture that was taken of me back in 2004. 2006. At the time this picture was taken, I'd been in South Africa for 2 years, and this is the first group of home-based caregivers that Holly and I trained. So if you see in the picture, there's 2 of us wrapped in blankets, and this is after we had done a 2-week training with these home-based caregivers, 26 of them in total, I believe, who were caring for their neighbors. And this was in the midst of the HIV crisis in South Africa, where approximately 40% of the adult population is infected by HIV. And at the time, there was very little access to HIV treatment, to antiretroviral treatment. And so a lot of people were dying, and a lot of children were being orphaned because the people that were dying were the adults, the parents, the moms, and the dads. And so this is 2 years after we got there. We ran this training just because I'd met this group of home-based caregivers, and Holly was trained in home-based care, and we came together to start Thembalethu in this very simple training on how to protect yourself from HIV and how to care for people that are bedbound, how to train the family on how to be able to provide really end-of-life palliative care, and how to care for orphans and things like that. So at that point, in 2004, God put AIDS and orphans on my heart, and had this week of epiphany where He really spoke to me a lot about His heart for the orphans and the vulnerable, and also His tremendous love for me. And so I went to South Africa to go and love on orphans. And this is then 2 years later what I ended up doing. I did some other orphan work in the meantime. But this is how Thembalethu started, was in this 10-day training we organized, getting all Department of Health staff in to train these caregivers we'd found. This is where we are in South Africa. So at the bottom tip of South Africa, over there on the edge, that white blob you see there is the country of Lesotho, and we're just on the border of that. Lesotho is a mountainous country, that's why you see lots of foothills to the mountains there. So I mentioned the situation. So there's a lot of HIV/AIDS. It remains about 40% of the population. One of the highest in South Africa. Nationwide, it's about 20%, and so our area is particularly hardly hit. And the people who are most vulnerable are young girls. Young girls between the ages of 14 and 24 are particularly vulnerable to HIV. They have, I think, 3 times the chance of getting infected than boys do of the same age. TB is also a really big issue. Tuberculosis, it's the number 1 killer of people in South Africa because of HIV and because of compromised immune systems. There's also a lot of broken families that are broken because of HIV, because also the legacy of apartheid in South Africa is really strong. So families are very broken. You end up with the father being in the city, working in the city, and the wife and the children being out in the rural area. And often the father will take an additional wife, formal or informal, because polygamy is quite common, in the city, and then he'll come back and forth. And so there's been very broken families, and often, I think 60%, there were recently a study out saying that 60% of children currently in South Africa are born and have no father listed on their birth certificate. So there's a tremendous amount of brokenness from the history and from all sides of South Africa. And also there's a lot of gender-based violence. That's one thing that we've been working increasingly on, because in our care, it's very difficult to care for someone who is very sick when there's lots of other dynamics going on at the same time that are really impacting their decisions and their own empowerment to be able to make good decisions for their own health. In South Africa, there is another statistic that I read recently was that the amount of violence against women in South Africa is as high as in any war zone. So there's a really high amount of rapes, a really high amount of murders of women. By intimate partners especially, and there's just altogether there's also forced marriage, early forced marriage, which is an issue that we've really tackled a lot, because in traditional areas like ours, girls 13, 14 often get married against their will and kind of kidnapped in certain cases even, and forced into marriage. So we try to work on that just to empower the girls to have a future and the next generation to have a future. And we've been actually quite successful in that too, in working with the tribal authorities. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of the situation. And so this is Thembalethu now. This is our team, and a lot of you might probably recognize this wall, because I think the teams took some pictures here. So this is me, and then Holly is there. So she is now the director. She and I started Thembalethu together, and she is now running things from there. And our social worker, Tanda, is on the right, and that's Tobile, just next to her, who's doing all the administrative roles that I used to do. And then the rest of our staff and caregivers, well, some of them are missing, but a lot of them are there. And we have 7 caregivers at the moment, and a nurse who is not pictured either. So and this is just, as I was going through, this is one of the pictures that I was reflecting upon, preparing for this, and this verse. It says, "For Christ's love compels us. God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting men's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation," from 2 Corinthians. And this is really what our heart is that in the midst of HIV, in the midst of brokenness, in the midst of an area that really has very little churches, to go and share God's love and this reconciliation that God has brought, and try to reconcile, be reconciled to people around us and show them this example of reconciliation, and also reconciliation, of course, to God as well. And this is actually Shalom, who's one of our board members and a strong Christian leader in the area, and we're glad to have him partner and be able to really feed in a lot of spiritual input and Bible studies and discipleship work he's done with our staff and with the community at large. And this is with a group of patients he was doing this with. So the programs that we have home-based hospice care, children and youth care and support, and then community mobilization and development, HIV prevention and care, and gender-based violence mobilization. And I'll be talking a little bit about each of those. So this guy, his name is Zakele. Zakele is 12 years old right now, and he's just a story I wanted to share from him. He's HIV positive, and he was born with it, and his mother was really afraid to tell him because she had infected him unwittingly. And so when he was about 9 or 10, he started to ask a lot of questions. And he asked his mom, well, why am I taking these pills and all the other kids aren't? And why do I have to go to the doctor and give blood? And why are all these things? And she was really afraid to tell him what was going on because she thought he would really hate her for having infected him. So she didn't tell him. And this is a very common practice that we see a lot. And so as he grew up more and more, he got to be about 12, and he just refused to take his pills anymore. He just said, no, I'm done. I don't know why I have to take them, but I don't want to take them anymore. And so we actually got referred him from the clinic because they know that we work a lot with HIV-positive kids, and especially around issues of disclosure. And so they referred him to us. And so we started working with his mother because she was so afraid of disclosing to him, because in disclosing to him, she was also telling him her HIV status and that she was the one responsible for not meaning to, but infecting him. But we worked with her a lot through the process, the importance of disclosing to him, and how it would really be to his benefit to understand. And it would also allow some healing for their own relationship. So this is a journey that we did with him, and he's now really happy to know the truth about what's going on after being hidden, the truth being hidden from him. There's a lot of kids that are like Zakele who are told that they have TB, and then as they're learning things in school and they see people around them, they're like, wait a minute, but TB, you start your medication, you have it for 6 months, and then you finish it, and mine just keeps going and going and going, and these are more like the things I talk about in school, and so they put the pieces together themselves often. But this is what we do, is try to support the parents in telling the kids so that we can build relationships between them and ultimately give the kids a better future, because if they default from their treatment, it causes a whole lot of problems in terms of their building resistant strains of HIV and running out of medication options. So we really try to support kids like Zakele in this case. And we also, let me add, we also do lots of camps with HIV positive kids. That's one thing that we do after we've made sure that they've been disclosed to, we take them to camp. A lot of times with HIV, there's so much isolation and stigma around it still. It's gotten a lot better, but the stigma and isolation is so much that the kids are often told that they have HIV, but don't tell anybody, it's a secret. You know, and so they're in this little world where they think nobody else is like them. No other kid has HIV and goes through these challenges and has to figure out how to be a teenager dealing with HIV. And so we bring them together with camps to have them do peer support a lot, and also give them education about how to be a teenager, how to protect themselves and how to protect others, and how to live in a godly way so that they can ultimately stay out of trouble and from infecting other people and making themselves sick and just out of trouble altogether. So this is home-based hospice care that we do as well. We're a member of the Hospice Association in KwaZulu-Natal. This picture you've already seen, and that is another one of our patients who some of you might know in this room. I think we went to do visits with her when you guys were here last. She was a patient that had an autoimmune condition that was really, really sick and unable to use her arms and legs. So when we found her, she was flat in bed and unable to feed herself or lift up her hand and open her hand, and her legs were no longer working. And so we just supported her along the way of getting her physical therapy, giving her a lot of exercise, going and doing physical therapy, and taking her to our offices where we have physical therapists come once a month from the department. And she's doing really well. She was walking with a walking frame. I've heard now that she's, in the last month, dropped the walking frame and being able to walk all by herself again now. So we're just really thankful that she had just, really for her situation, a really remarkable recovery. And her family support was also just amazing. So that's one case. Another case in hospice was we had a patient who, 72 years old, had arthritis and was recently diagnosed with HIV as well. And this old granny, a go-go, as they're called in South Africa, she just kept getting weaker and weaker and losing weight. And she wasn't able to walk anymore, and she couldn't figure out why, and she got referred to us by one of our caregivers. And we found that she had recently been tested for TB at the clinic. Because she was coughing and things, we said, no, I think you should probably go back to the clinic again and get tested again, even though the clinic had just found her negative. And after a while, she went back and we found that she indeed did have TB, and that it was the TB that was causing her to be really sick. And so she went from being basically bedbound and very limited in her mobility to being able to get up around and being able to have her life back again. So, so just a couple stories about that and the work that we do with home-based care and hospice care. This picture, because of the kids, I did show this already, but this is a picture of those Bible-based life skills that we do in the schools. We have 4 different schools we're at the moment, and 8 classes in total of 6th and 7th graders. And it's just been amazing. A lot of the teachers are afraid of talking about sex and afraid of talking about, like HIV and stuff in the middle of their classroom. And so they've really welcomed us coming in and speaking about things that they're quite afraid of doing. So it's been really nice, and it's been just encouraging, just making sure that the Bible gets in there, and just how welcoming they've been, and letting us go in with God's word has been amazing. And we also do work with orphan and vulnerable children, which is not as much of a focus as it has been in the past, but we work with kids who have lost both parents and helping them get birth certificates, and there's government grants available for them, basically just helping make sure that they're cared for well in their homes, whether they're getting a foster care grant or whatnot. And then we also do lots of HIV testing and referrals, because there's a lot of kids who don't even know that they have HIV, and they end up getting really sick, and it's often too late to be able to help them. So we try to catch the HIV cases before it's too late in the community, because the Department of Health often doesn't make it in the community. They wait for you to come in. So we like to go out instead. And then we found that parenting skills is a really big thing. Whenever we work with a child, whatever way that we're working with a child, working with the parent is so important, because you can only work so much with the child before all their home situation and the way that the parent and the information the parent's giving them, it might conflict with what we're doing. So we always try to work with the parents as well to provide parenting skills and talk to them about, there's an attitude in Zulu culture, especially in this rural, where we work, that children play with children and adults don't play with children. And so it often ends up creating a huge problem, because there's not a lot of relationship that happens between the adults and the kids. And so we try to really encourage them to have that relationship so they can have that avenue to be able to speak in their kids' lives as they get older, because there's a lot of wisdom they have about how to live their lives and how to be in relationships that they don't often share. And that's why the HIV rate also continues to get worse, because the parents don't often actually engage their kids and communicate. And we found a lot of success, just amazing stories from the parents we've worked with on that. We also do community development, so whether it be health education or gender-based violence prevention, we do lots of work. I mentioned that we have worked with the tribal authorities and actually got a new draft policy in place that there will no longer be allowed early forced marriage in the community, which we're really, really pleased about, because it's really a hard thing to see young girls just stopped in the middle of school and not allowed to continue, and not allowed to ultimately give their families that are coming a better hope for the future. And these are some preschools that we support in some of the work. So we work with about 30 preschools in the area. It started because when my eldest was about preschool age, I wanted him to learn Zulu, and so I sent him to a local preschool in our area and was just shocked to find how poorly resourced it was. And not only just in physical things, so like the chairs and the tables you see in that picture, those are all things that we gave them. They didn't have, a lot of times we'd go into a classroom and there would just be a few toys that they'd pull out of a bag, and they're mostly broken. And that would be the things that kids have to play with. And that would be the resources. And they might have things on the wall, but they weren't necessarily even using them, or they might a schedule on the wall that they wouldn't actually be applying to their daily life. It was kind of like a daycare dropping service. And so we really wanted to give a chance, because it's the first entry that a child has into school, to really give them a chance. In the rural schools, it's often huge classrooms, 50 kids in first grade and kindergarten. And so trying to give them a real good chance at holding a pencil before they've ever been to school, and all these kinds of things. So it's just been amazing to work. We work with the teachers and do workshops with them to support them in being able to be better teachers in the community. So this is a group of the creche teachers, preschool teachers, and that's Terry, one of our South African volunteers that works with the creches. And then this is another group, actually from University of Denver, that came in. This is a creche that they built, or they helped to build with the community and gave them funds to finish. And that's been a nice partnership we've had as well. So that's basically the end of my presentation. But I just do want to say that we are trusting God for more support for our work. We have been struggling a lot with keeping up with our salaries for our nurse and our social worker. And we'd like to bring on a pastoral support person as well, like a chaplain, in the future, because we haven't had funds for that recently. We try to just disciple our staff at the moment. And and we really appreciate your prayers and for sending out teams, and we look forward to the future of more support from you guys. This is another picture, just by the way. I was looking through old presentations earlier, and this is a picture of a go-go, an old granny with her grandkids, some of the kids that we've supported in the past. So, and there's the team that came out to us earlier this year. So that's all. And if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have.
So you showed a picture of the ceremony of the girls coming out or being of age to marry. How old are those girls?
Yeah, it's they range from like 14. They're supposed to be 17 or 18 to 20, but they can often be 14, 15. They have this traditional virginity testing thing that they do. The older women in the community are trying to keep it up for the HIV prevention thing. I don't know if it actually is working, but it kind of whenever after they've been tested for virginity, then they normally do it after that. So it's supposed to be 17, 18, but it isn't always. The parents, largely it's the mother or the parent will get them signed up for the virginity testing, and then they kind of go along with it, and then it's large. Yeah, often it's the same girls that go through this are the ones that are being forced into early marriage. So they kind of sort of go hand in hand to a certain degree. Yeah, it kind of is. Because ultimately the girls that you saw there are only girls that have been certified as virgins. And so it's kind of like an open market. So there was a whole bunch of men there, and it's kind of like, it's not the best of practices, but it makes for a great picture. So that's why I was sharing it. Yes.
Is there, you said that the men often have like polygamy, and that they're off in the city and they have a wife there. Is there anything as far as education for the men who aren't there? Like they'll have the women in there. But is there education for the women that are at home as well as the men that are off, that this practice they may be spreading, getting it one place and bringing it back home?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing because we have very few men during the year, and the men mostly come home at Easter and over Christmas. And when they do that, the alcohol consumption level is amazingly high. And so it's a really difficult thing. We actually don't do a lot of work over Christmas. And one of the reasons is just because the amount of violence that goes on and the amount of like drinking and stuff. So it's a difficult thing. I think if there were organizations in the city, that's where they should really be targeted, because when they come home to the rural areas, it's not a very easy window. But yeah, it is a big challenge, I think. And I think it's the city organizations really to be working on that one. But I think it is well recognized that they call it multiple concurrent partners. So basically you have more than one partner at the same time. So one in the city and one in the rural area, and that's ultimately what's making HIV spread so much as well. Yeah, so there's a sign-up thing here if you'd like to get onto our newsletter, and there's a little bit of brochures here as well if you'd like more information or to know how to support. So,
Any other questions? You guys are a quiet bunch.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit more. I had the opportunity to talk to you last night, but maybe tell us a little bit more about the how your transition here has affected your family, maybe a little bit, just briefly, and then are there any other? I realize you had all those programs that you shared with us, but do you all have hopes of adding any other future programs other than the pastoral care coming in that you talked about, and something that maybe, because our church has been involved with some other churches in the South Africa project, anything that we could support in that, you could see us being involved in?
yeah, okay. So I've been in South Africa for the last 15 years, as I said, and we've 3 months ago moved back to the Seattle area where I grew up, and it's been it's been a big change. So my kids, we still have actually a house with 9 acres in South Africa, quite rural-ish, and now we're living in an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. So it's been this massive change, and our kids have been doing pretty well. My daughter is really grieving. I think she's very emotional and she's really not having an easy time figuring out what to do with all these emotions of missing things and being excited about new things. And yeah, she's really struggling, the 6-year-old. So yeah, so I would appreciate your prayers for her, because we're still trying to figure out how to help her through this massive change. They've been to the U.S. before, but like 6 weeks at a time. So this is very different. So yeah, in terms of new programs, I think I don't think we have anything really new on at the moment. I think we'd like to continue with what we're doing. So a lot of HIV prevention in the schools, HIV testing in the communities, hospice care, the hospice side of things. And one of the things that is relatively new that we've started working on is our hospice work is limited to people that are really sick, but trying to support people on kind of the side of hospice care, to support people who are on HIV treatment but well, and trying to keep them well and on their treatment, because as soon as they stop taking it, then they can develop resistance, and then they can ultimately become really sick. And so because there's only a certain amount of medicines available, they exhaust one and then they go to the next and they exhaust that, and then especially with kids, this is a really big issue. But it happens with adults as well. So trying to support adherence to treatment is one thing that the new project that we're starting now. But also we'd like to do more work with HIV positive kids and continue to work together with them and support them in camps, so they get together and not just be us with our nurse and our social worker working with them one-on-one, but getting them together as a group, letting them know that they're not alone in this, and giving them skills to cope through that as well. So I think for you as a church, one of the things we're really trying to, what I'm really trying to raise support for right now is that our nurse and our social worker in particular get salaries that are probably maybe half of the market value in South Africa, and we'd really like to give them a boost so that we can keep them on. We've had a problem with them leaving us because there's other jobs that pay considerably more than we do. So we'd really like to get them up to get kind of continuity of care and really be able to invest and keep the staff members that we have on. So that's one thing we're really trusting God for right now. So thank you, Jim. Yeah.
Are condoms available to people?
Yeah, condoms are available. In fact, they're even available in grape, strawberry, banana, and I don't know what other flavor they just came out with. The Department of Health, unfortunately, has kind of, well, South African government as a whole has basically seen condoms as the answer to HIV, and not done. You know, when I first went to South Africa, it was A for abstinence, B for be faithful, and C for condomize. And that's kind of what it was. And of course, it's much more complicated than that, especially now that there's treatment. It's, you know, adhere to your treatment. If you adhere to your treatment, then you can't really infect people very well, very easily. And so it's much more complicated than that. But the government has left off any of the abstinence, and any of the be faithful is basically gone. And they just say, condoms, condoms, condoms. And that's kind of all they do. And so, yes, they are available, but unfortunately, that's way too often the only answer that the government ever gives to solve this massive problem that they have. Yeah?
At dinner last night, we were talking about how much the salaries are of the nurse and social worker. And I think that would be interesting to share just because it's vastly different than here.
Yeah, so like the going rate, well, not what we're paying currently, but the going rate for a social worker is, and I'm just figure out this in my head now, but a going rate for a social worker is about 15,000 Rand a month, so let's say it's about $1,000 a month in dollars. That's a social worker. A nurse would probably be slightly more, let's say maybe maybe like $1,500 a month for a nurse, for a professional or like registered nurse.
As the kids grow up, do they go off, do the kids that you work with, do they end up going to college? Is there an opportunity for that? Or are they just expected to get a job when they finish their schooling? And do they come back? Do they go away and come back? Or?
Yeah, so yeah, the youth after high school, so gives you a picture kind of before that a little bit. So a study was recently done in South Africa looking at high school completion. And so they followed people from grade R, which is kindergarten, all the way to 12th grade. And they found that, and they have a final exam at the end of 12th grade, which basically determines if you graduate or not. And they found that half of that class, and this was a recent class, I think 2018, half of that class did not make it to grade 12. And of the half that made it to grade 12, only half of those actually passed the final exam. So you have 25% of the population that's actually in the whole country. This is not in a rural area like ours, which is I'm sure the percentages are way higher. There's only 25% of the nation's population that actually is managing to pass high school. So college is only available to a small number. The school systems are really not good. It's one of the worst school systems in the world as a whole. There are good pockets, but there's a lot of really bad pockets of school. And those who have that chance, who have passed, getting to university it's a big challenge because there's not a huge amount of financial resources available in the government, but there is some. But youth unemployment is really high. It's like, between the ages of like 16 and 40, I think even, youth in South Africa goes to 35. So that whole population has huge unemployment, like 80% or something. Like you're really, if you are a young person and you find a job, you are really, really blessed. So it's hard because there's not very many options for young people, which I think also, of course, makes the HIV situation that much worse because there's not a lot of hope for what they can do. Yeah. But of course, let me say, but there always is hope, of course, in Jesus, we know.
You talked about apartheid. What have been the lasting effects of apartheid?
Yeah, that's a big question. The lasting effects of apartheid. So apartheid is basically, it meant separateness, right? So it kept white separate from black and enforced it in such a way. So it limited also job opportunities. So blacks, like one example, it could go on for a while about this, but one example of that would be for blacks, the main two jobs that they could go into with any hope of making money was nursing and teaching. And so you ended up with a lot of people going into those two careers, which you really want committed, dedicated people who have a heart for those things going into those careers, but instead you got people looking for money going into those two careers. Because there wasn't very many other options. So one of the consequences is now the health sector is full of a whole lot of really apathetic nurses and really apathetic teachers. And that is a tremendous, that's one of the many. The other thing is this whole the male absence, like this male flight to the cities, is a huge, and the breakup of families that happened with that. That was way before apartheid started. That was when the British were in charge, even before that started. But this whole legacy of just this separateness and breaking up families and breaking up cultures as well. Because then the men are like, well, who are we then in the midst of this if the women can run life, everything without us, and we're never there? And yeah, so there's a lot of challenges that came up because of apartheid. And of course, I mean, South Africa, I should mention, South Africa is the most disparate country in the world. So you have like the preschools that I was showing you here. They charge 30 Rand a month, which is $2 a month, to send your child to preschool. And that's like basically a full day of school. In Winterton, the white town where my child went to preschool, it was approximately 30 Rand an hour instead of 30 Rand a month. So you have this tremendous disparity. And of course, there's beautiful preschools and beautiful resources and all these things, but it continues to be a tremendously disparate country. And I think rural areas like ours that still have pockets of whites and pockets of money are a really good example of that. You have 5-star hotels next to, I made the mistake when I first had a friend that my first friend I had came to visit years ago. We went to go do a home visit, and we went to this visit, and it was raining, and the roof was leaking, and this young girl had just died, and it was like muddy on the floor, and they didn't have money to call a mortuary, so she was just lying, her body was just lying there, and we were doing this home visit, and then that night I took my friend to a 5-star hotel. And she's like, don't ever do that to anyone ever again. I was like, oh, I didn't even register. Like, I was like, I just wanted you to see the mountain. I didn't even think that this was like a little bit excessively crude, like to have this contrast in like a matter of a few hours, because it's just part of life in South Africa. So.
What does Thembalethu mean? Does it have a meaning?
Yeah, Thembalethu means our hope. Yeah. So. Yeah, thank you guys very much.
Folks, as you've been able to see through pictures and you've been able to hear through stories, you see what it is that those of us that get a chance to go, you see what we see, a slice. You get to see some of the people and get to know them. And Betsy talked a lot about the heartache and the joy that get mixed in the daily parts, and we feel and experience that. Betsy, know that this congregation has, for the most part, not known you, but have prayed for you, have been grateful to put supplies together to bring for you, and have wanted you to continue to do great work there. And at the same time, know that we will be in continued prayer for you here as you continue to love and minister and work with the folks there, and do all you can to be mom and support here for your family as they transition and things like that. In any way that we can possibly be of support to you, do not hesitate to ask. If you feel inclined to help and want to help, she's got information over here on the table as to how you can partner with Thembalethu. Also, if you want to know more about it, there's a pad over here to sign up and put your name on an email list. Trust me, you're going to get inspirational stories dropped to your inbox that just show you what great work God is doing. And thankfully, we've been able to be a part of. So God bless you, and thank you for coming and being a part with us. Will you join me in prayer? God, we're grateful for this night and this time. Thank you so much for letting us hear these stories and to be a part of this great work. God, be with Betsy and her family as they transition here and continue to learn and grow. And yet we know that part of her heart is still there, and the work that is being undertaken there, may we continue to find ways to be with her, to support it, to love it, and to encourage it. Not only with our thoughts and prayers and with our money and our attention, but with our time and our sweat equity too. God, we're grateful for all that you've done to bless and nourish this friendship and partnership in ministry thus far. Continue to bless it in the years to come so that others will see what we do together and be blessed by the work we do in your Son's name. In his holy name we pray this night. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Betsy will be up front for a minute if you want to come by and say hello and maybe ask another question.